Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Clemens. I'm a co-founder of PRISM, which is the sponsor today of this. I'm also CEO of Widehall and editor of National Interest. I think there's not a topic as important in many ways when you sort of look at the important vectors of the country when it comes to how is it going to fill out its power grid? How is it going to, basically build this new infrastructure of AI? All these new arenas of growth are very, very dependent upon the calculation and equation for critical minerals in the United States and around the world. And because of a lot of hiccups in that process, particularly during COVID, there's a realization that, sometimes being dependent even on national security or even on our business in ways on certain players in the world may be something we need to correct. So we're going to have a conversation about these priorities with a really interesting group of people. And we want to bring as many of you into this conversation as we can. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the president and co-founder of PRISM, Christy Rogers, who's been engaged in supply chain issues for a long time and critical materials issues, critical minerals issues. We also have Mike Sart, Director of Government Affairs at Hekla Industries. I will tell you that Mike is so cool. We're doing this online because he's sitting in Juneau, Alaska right now at 6 a.m. and joining us. And he's got a really cool story, so I want him to tell all of that. And Hekla Mining is, one of the fast track mining operations that President Trump has elevated. And then in just a little bit, we're going to have joining us Representative Mariannette Miller-Meeks from Indiana, who has a number of pieces of legislation she has introduced and helped sponsor in this arena. So without further ado, let me invite Christy Rogers, who's the formal sponsor of this today, to share with us some opening thoughts, a blessing, if you will.
A blessing. Thanks so much, Steve. Good morning to all, and very early morning, Mike. Thanks for joining. As Steve said, I've been involved in global supply chain issues for quite some time. We started a global supply chain task force about 5.5 years ago that has evolved into PRISM. So, Steve, thank you for your leadership and giving your heft and knowledge to this organization. And what we are really focused on, we're industry-led. PRISM is a nonprofit 501c3 that is industry-led and looking for solutions in finding in ways to increase the US's government as well as industry's access to critical minerals and rare earths in the short term, and also implement policies now that impact the long term, meaning making our supply chains more resilient and more secure. That means actually reshoring a lot of our mining, our refining, our processing, and advanced manufacturing, but also ally shoring. And so that's also very important because right now we have a challenge where we just don't have enough access to critical minerals, rare earths in the short term. We need our allies for that. So PRISM is also working very closely, particularly in the Western Hemisphere with Canada, Mexico, but also South and Central America, to ensure we work with those partners that actually have a lot of these resources, are currently mining, to find processing and refining solutions. I think this administration is making giant steps towards reindustrializing and reshoring a lot of this, but it will take time and it will take an unprecedented level of cooperation between industry and government. And so that's what PRISM is here to do, is to bridge that gap and make certain that we continue, we being the giant we, the United States and our companies, continue to lead in innovation and technology in this front. I think the only way out of this problem, meaning where we don't control our own destiny with our supply chains, China does. The only way out of this problem is to rely on what made America special and continues to, and that is our entrepreneurship, our innovation, our capital markets, and our allies. So I look forward to today's conversation. Thank you all very much for joining. And if you have any interest in joining our merry band at PRISM, Steve and I are happy to answer any questions. So thanks for that, Steve.
Well, that's great. And they can, what's our website? It's prisminnovation.org, right?
Yep, prisminnovation.org.
So you can go on and sign up for whatever we're doing and producing. But let me ask you a question, Christy, if I may. There's a lot of hyperventilation out there about China, right? So China, in some way, is being treated as the new Sputnik to animate. But let me just be fair to the Chinese for a minute. What they've done for decades is to say, these materials and minerals and strategies. And I remember somebody that worked at Skadden Arp was putting together long-term, petroleum and oil and energy deals for them. There was a long-termism that was baked into China. We've all been writing it and witnessing it and watching it, kind of in a bland way, and says, well, wow, China's really smart at what they're doing. And now we woke up and said, oh my God, we're behind, or we're being challenged. I just want to ask you, is it possible in any real way, what is it going to take to do to put together a real action plan in the United States that can have serious weight vis-a-vis decades of planning and pre-positioning and resource dominance that China has been able to achieve?
Well, as I mentioned, it's this problem, or this current challenge, our current situation, is four decades in the making, right? We, the United States, for various reasons, have pushed our manufacturing overseas and primarily to China, and China saw that and quite frankly capitalized on it. Well done them. They saw an opportunity, and they moved out smartly and very fast. What we need to do is put in place, what the administration's calling is a reindustrialization strategy. That's a whole of government. It's not just whole of government, that's whole of nation. Going back to what I said, that's going to require industry and the US government to cooperate and collaborate on an unprecedented level. A lot, and I'm not singling out any companies, but we have created an environment where it is every company for themselves. We now have to look at a strategy that is a whole of nation strategy. For our own economic security and national security, we have to level the playing field with China. And in order to do that, we do need our allies. We have to, China has over 1 billion people. We have 330 million. And to create sort of a demand or a demand pull where we can reindustrialize appropriately, we need our allies to level the playing field with China. And, it can't be, it can't be, and it shouldn't be, bad.
So cooling demand is a big part of this.
Completely. Yeah, 100%. We need to work with our allies together in how we can increase our access to critical minerals and rare earths to meet the energy demand, to produce the advanced technologies, whether it's medical technologies or military technologies, to, again, level the playing field with China. And why is that important? Because then we can actually think about really normalizing relationships. It's not good for any country to control as much of a supply chain as they do. And in many cases, it's 100% of our supply chains that they control.
Right. Well, thank you for that. So, Chrissy, you're going to stay around. We're going to be part of the conversation through the whole thing. But I would like to introduce now and have a conversation with Mike. Sart. And Mike, am I saying Sart right, or is it Satri? Satri. So my team was wrong. Satri. I saw the spelling, so my apologies. So Mike Satri. He's head of government affairs at Hecla Industries. He's sitting in Juneau, Alaska right now. So my hat is off on that. That's the best humble brag, because I think we'd all like to be in Juneau, Alaska. He takes a boat each day to the mine that they've got out there. He'll tell a little bit about that. But I want to mention that Hecla's Libby exploration project in Montana was one of those selected for what was called the Fast 41 Critical Minerals Dashboard by the Trump administration. He's out there. And Mike was also the past president, current board member of the American Exploration and Mining Association. So, Mike, thanks so much for talking with us. And we've been doing these online series. We've got a really great alumni group of various people have been in these conversations, members of industry, think tank people from the administration, congressmen and senators, and also global leaders kind of looking at how do we get this equation right. So I'd just like to start, first of all, tell us about your projects and your daily life in Juneau, which I think is interesting. But also, I think the big thing is we're having these meetings is what do we need to get out of the way to be more successful in this critical minerals priority that clearly the country has right now?
Yeah, so Steve, thank you, and Christy, thank you as well. Really an honor to be here with all of you today. So Mike Satry, Director of Governmental Affairs for Hecla Mining Company. Just a little bit about Hecla, if you don't know us, we're actually a 134-year-old American mining company based in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So we have great experience in providing the metals that America needs for literally generations, and we're happy to, we're ready to do so for generations more to come. So we have we're primarily known as a silver producer. We produce almost 40% of the silver supply here in the United States. Our mine in Idaho, the Lucky Friday, we've been operating for over 60 years. We have a shaft that goes 10,000 feet below the surface. We have some incredible miners that are producing metals every day right there in North Idaho in the Silver Valley where we got our start.
I just had to stop. The mine is called Lucky Friday.
Lucky Friday, absolutely.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we've been in the Silver Valley since the beginning. But our biggest and best asset in the United States is the Greens Creek mine in Southeast Alaska. Here in Juneau, Greens Creek produces about 9 million ounces of silver a year. It's located in a national monument underneath a wilderness area. In Alaska, we have the largest population of brown bears per square mile than anywhere in the world. So there are constant companions out there. We have salmon that spawn in the creek that runs right in front of the mine portal. It's truly a special place to operate.
Is brown bear another way to say grizzly?
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
So they're the coastal brown bears.
These are not little tame bears.
These are not little bears, but it's just it's an amazing example for the past 35 years how we've been able to produce responsibly in a truly special place. On an island where there's only one small village far south of us. Miners take a boat 5 a.m. Every day. We produce silver, we produce the critical mineral zinc, we produce lead, gold, and now we're actually getting saleable quantities of the critical material copper. So when you look at mines like Greens Creek and what we're doing at Lucky Friday, I mean these are the sort of operations that we need more of if we are even. I'm not even sure if we're ready to win the critical minerals race, but to get to the starting line, we have to have more of these operations, let alone get to the pieces that Christy was talking about, on the processing side. We do have operations in Canada. We have a silver mine in the Yukon. We have a gold mine in Quebec, and so we're utilizing our allies to help us with our domestic our domestic mineral needs. But I think when we start to look at what is going to move the needle long term, I think you need to start sit down with the companies like Hecla, look at what we've done literally over generations, see the lessons that have been learned over time, and look at what we need to do going forward. So you mentioned a little bit our project in Montana. We have the Libby Exploration Project, which the White House recognized as a priority project and placed on the Fast 41 transparency list. This is a project that has been in various stages of permitting and litigation for over 30 years. And there's another project that we have just on the other side of the mountains there, kind of the same ore body, if you will. Another, same story, kind of a wash, rinse, repeat of permitting, records of decision, litigation, remands, and they've been in that cycle for decades now. And yet we're looking at one of the largest undeveloped copper silver prospects really in North America. So if we can't figure out how to move projects like this forward, over the last 35 years, if we can't do that going forward, we are never going to have that domestic, mineral capacity that we're all looking for. So, when we start to look at permitting reform, litigation reform, those are some of the key, cornerstones of what we need to do to make sure that we can have more mines in the United States, more mineral production, and then start to, we also have to look at the same time as how do we process those materials, because that's key as well.
So, Mike, I know that you're into silver and copper, but there are a lot of similar things in a lot of these areas. One of the questions I have is, I'm very familiar with, they often say 18 to 20 years, for any kind of new mine, which is, not going to be impactful on immediate need, other than you're sending market signals down the road. But I am interested in other things that I'd love to get your perspective on, on how they fit into the package. So I know that you're running mines, active mines, doing all this stuff. But where does critical metals recycling come in? Where does another thing I become interested in is already developed mines that have mine waste or tailings. And the fact that many of these tailings, particularly in copper, are embedded with huge amounts of copper in the United States, that if you were able to extract the copper, the volume of copper that is there from mines that have already been developed and done, you could make copper great again in America. I mean, in a way, you could transform that if you could find a way to process that in an environmentally responsible way. We don't have, I guess, smelters and whatnot here, but there are other ways to do it. I'm just interested in these other parts of the equation around excavation and mining traditionally. How do they fit into the equation?
Yeah, and let me briefly touch on recycling. Look, recycling is great. We need to do more of it, but the reality is the vast demands on metals, the metals consumption that modern society has, recycling will never ever meet that demand. There's just simply not enough material out there. But we need to find better ways to do it, right? We need to be more efficient in our use. But let's look at tailings and waste streams. That's a really important point. Most critical minerals, rare earths, some of the stuff that's very hard to find. Geologists aren't necessarily going to be out in the field trying to find those deposits and open a mine on some sort of rare earth that's extremely hard to find in economic quantity. So you're only going to find those as a byproduct, right, at an existing operating mine or in a tailings from something that's already processed. So we have, for example, here in Alaska, we have a very large dry stack tailings facility. We've run some calculations because of the high grade of the mine. There's probably almost $3 billion in critical minerals sitting in that facility. And so, we are now looking at and working with universities and private groups on how do we reprocess that in order to maximize the use, maximize the metals that we have mined and make sure that we're incredibly efficient.
Well, Mike, we're going to come back to that because I see the Congresswoman has joined us. And so we're going to continue this conversation. I'm going to have a little exchange with the Congresswoman, everyone. And then we're going to bring you and Christy back and take this further because we've got with us, and greetings and good morning, Representative Mariannette Miller-Meeks from Indiana, who's really into mining, really into critical materials in a big way. Not your average representative in a sense of, they're just learning what this field is all about. I will tell you that Mike Satry is sitting in Juneau, Alaska, Mariannette. He's in there doing this at like 6 a.m. And so our hat was off, and he takes a boat each day from Juneau to one of their mining operations up there in Alaska. Really, really fascinating. So thanks so much for joining us. Let me just start out. You have helped author and sponsor a couple of pieces of legislation in this, but we know it's an administration priority. We know it's a business priority. And I just started out this discussion saying, the lift involved. It's easy to talk the talk of wanting to change the supply chain dynamics, the domestic mineral resources, begin looking at, how do you begin looking at the demand side of what's necessary. And the lift is huge. And I just love to get your picture on how America deals with that lift responsibly and quickly.
So first and foremost, let me just say that with the last administration's push through the IRA and, push for different types of energy and what they consider clean energy and suppression of oil and gas, it's interesting to me that we couldn't get something
through. I just want to apologize. I said Indiana, I meant Iowa, and I apologize. Please, Iowans, my heart goes out to you. I apologize. So please continue. I'm sorry.
So, we're a little bit behind from the standpoint of where we are on critical minerals, rare earths, battery minerals. And so for me, it was the Ames lab, one of our Department of Energy labs is in Iowa, although it's not in my district. I visit with them a lot because of my focus on energy. So I have a healthcare background, but Iowa's an energy state. So when I came into Congress in 2021, I started really focusing a lot on energy, and also because young people in our state were interested in clean energy, but it's beyond energy. So when you're thinking of critical minerals, rare earths, I think typically people think of energy and electronics, but you have to think of aerospace, defense, batteries, automotive, catalytic converters. So all of these, the platinum minerals, All of these minerals exist. They exist in the United States. They exist on the seabed. You can get them from recycling, but as your previous guest said, we're not going to get enough through recycling. And so when you look at the industries that need these types of minerals, whether they're rare earths or whether they're other, platinum minerals, the battery minerals, or even the more common minerals, copper and nickel, then there's several things. One is permitting. And we have been woefully behind on permitting to do anything in the United States. So permitting is part of that, and we're working on that. But two, it's a national security risk when you think about who owns and processes and refines the majority of critical minerals that we need for all the variety of things I said, which includes defense. And it's China. So the Chinese Communist Party has mines. They have almost all of the processing and refining. And they're also, one area where we're ahead of them is in seabed mining. We have the technology, but China is rapidly catching up on seabed mining technology. And we already know that other adversarial nations have made incursions into the Arctic. And primarily it's because of minerals. So I think it's very important that we catch up from the regulatory standpoint, the support, number one, for the industry, support for permitting that will allow it, but also support for the marketplace, which we don't have. We need to put that infrastructure in place. So that's the direction I come from and why I introduced the several bills I have, even though I'm nowhere near the Arctic or the ocean.
No, Iowa, you're bridging them. I want to mention, out of respect, Carl Mueller, who's the director of the Ames National Lab, is here online with us. Hi, Carl. You look remarkably like Mike Sartre. I don't know if you're related, and we'll have to kind of get into some genealogy there. But we'll bring you in a few minutes if you don't mind, because it'd be great to hear your perspective. But I do want to get into seabed mining because someone we've had on this program in the past is Gerard Barron, the CEO of the metals company. And, he's the one who wrote a letter to President Trump around some of the seabed mining stuff, and they kind of catch on. And I guess perhaps my question is, why are we so late on so much of this?
I don't know if it's the whole anti-mining perspective. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but as I said, I've been at the Ames laboratory. I consider Iowa State University in my district, even though it's not. And it's great to have the director on. It's a real gem, and we're very proud to have it in the state. But it was through my work there and the bill we had to have hard drives from the Department of Defense go to Ames Lab so they can extract the rare earths and the magnets. And then for whatever reason, that got me, information about seabed mining. I have a nodule, a polymetallic nodule in my office in DC, as a matter of fact. And so you're just looking at this availability because the amount of earth you have to move to get rare earths is significant. It's a huge undertaking, and it's a huge investment that you have to make in order to extract those metals and those minerals. And so, but the seabed is something that we have technology, we have companies that will do it. So why we didn't support this, I'm not sure if it comes from this attitude of not mining, not digging things out of the earth. It's hard to say, or if it's just they didn't want to support the industry. But it is an area where we have an advantage right now. We know that other countries, and as I said, adversarial countries want to take part in that, but it's certainly bringing some processing and refining back toward the United States, away from China, which controls most, I think almost all but one of the processing and refinery facilities. Bringing that back on board, I think, is critically important. And I think the Trump administration gets it. We need energy. We need all types of energy. But as I said, it's beyond energy, electronics, aerospace, batteries, automotive, defense. So there are, and I said chips as well. I'm kind of including that in electronics. But there is a vast need for these minerals and elements throughout our society. And I really think it's imperative. And so very happy that the Trump administration, as you said, both Burgum and Wright, understand the need. And I think for something we've been trying to push for a couple of years I think is going to gain traction this administration.
Let me ask you a question that may be provocative. I don't mean it in a provocative way, but it's I think it's a challenge. I think a lot of people are trying to get their head around two things at the same time. One is I'm learning a lot more about what's called pooling demand. That pooling demand is a really key element of getting demand in place to kind of get the drivers and the economics right that are needed. And so, you've got, China's billion plus people, you've got 300 million in America, you've got, Canada, Mexico, maybe Japan, you've got Europe, you've got 500 million people. You begin looking at it, and I'm sort of interested if it's a national security priority to begin creating a kind of aggregate interest in this. How do you think it's going to play with our trade policy, with tariffs, with other things, where it feels like the world is becoming a collection of new nationalisms, where that kind of common bonding and pooling is something that is kind of going against the flow of the moment? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think a lot of people would ask, are we building the common bonds with other allied potential parties enough so that you can win the critical minerals race, or are you undermining it with a kind of short-term focus on, trade and tariffs that we need to be cautious about or not cautious about?
Well, I think it's a great question. So first, I'm going to answer it by saying I think this is a niche issue. I don't think a lot of people have caught on to the importance of this. And so it's one of the reasons I was interested in speaking with you all today, because I personally think it's very important, but I don't think a lot of people are aware of what's happening. Representative Gary Palmer took a CODEL down to Central America, and we were doing that because we wanted to talk about rare earths and processing and onshoring or nearshoring. So there are people within Congress and the Senate, as well as the administration, that understand the importance of this. It's futuristic. So sometimes we focus on the here and the now. So I think this is one of those things where people come together because they have a common interest, a common desire, and for that matter, a common enemy. And why do I say enemy? I say, if you look at the way, number one, it's an opaque marketplace. So there's not transparency in the marketplace. There's not really even a marketplace, which is hard. That's why it's hard to get people to invest and why this bill is needed. It's to set up that framework. So when you don't have a marketplace and you have a country that controls the majority of mining, the majority of processing and refinery, but there's no price transparency, then people don't know what they're going to pay. And if a company gets into it, then
if I may, not only is that because of China controlling so many other parts of the legs
supply chains,
they have the pricing power in the world, and they can collapse. I mean, it's just not talked about much, but it's a huge part of the equation, which means you've got to disrupt that element of it, right?
Exactly. And so you took off right where I was going, which is they control the marketplace, they control prices, they can drop their prices to rock bottom to get businesses out. And when it takes such a significant amount of investment, I think that countries can rally around that because they too need these minerals. So I think if the United States, if we put in the regulatory framework, the infrastructure that we need, this is an area where we can get allies that, to your point, then build in number and build in volume, because all of these industries are multinational, the need for these metals.
Would you mind if I brought Carl Mueller in for a minute?
Oh, I think it'd be great if you brought Carl in. We're going to be bringing people to the Ames lab in a couple of weeks.
When I worked for Senator Bingaman of New Mexico, we had 2 weapons labs, Los Alamos and SIA National Labs. And I got to tell people who are not familiar either with the weapons labs or the energy labs in the country, the most brilliant ideas in the world come out of those labs. And I sort of feel like we often drop the ball on some of the brilliant ideas. So, Carl, it's really great to have you here. But would love to kind of, as we're talking about the energy infra, I got together with an AI CEO recently. He said, my top, up at night issue is copper. And so when you begin looking at different dimensions of the resource questions and energy questions, would love, Carl, to kind of get a quick snapshot from you about what are vital pieces of this conversation we need to have.
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me in. I came to listen today. I have not yet met Representative Miller-Meeks. I am new to
we can arrange that,
2 weeks.
I started on June 1st at Ames Lab, and my very first day I spent in Alaska because Secretaries Wright and Burgum were up there at a sustainable energy conference, and it was a great opportunity just to meet with the Secretary and other laboratory directors. And you're absolutely right. There are so many amazing ideas that bubble up through the fundamental research that we do at the national laboratories. And then we also get the opportunity to transition that fundamental research into actual practice. And so at the lab here, we steward the Critical Materials Innovation Hub. And in that, within the hub, we've been able to develop new technologies for reclaiming and recycling critical minerals. You've heard a little bit about this, crushing up hard drives, doing some really, really great and efficient extraction processes, working with a number of companies to look at the whole supply chain, trying to find replacements for critical minerals in some applications. We are also very much into rare earth magnet design and trying to bring back to the United States the actual manufacturing and working with companies, and even training individuals to be able to work in these high-tech industries. So we're very excited at the lab to help lead this revolution in critical minerals and materials. And we look forward to partnering more and working more with industry, with other researchers. We have 9 national laboratories that work together already, 15 universities working with us in the hub, and 20 or 30 affiliate companies now. And
Yes.
so we are really bullish on critical
Let me
minerals
ask you
and the
both, and I would love
technology.
to bring, Mike Satry and Christy back into this, but
Yeah.
as the Congresswoman and she has sponsored the Unleash America's Offshore Critical Minerals and Resources Act. We've discussed seabed mining and other extraction modalities. She's also sponsored the Securing America's Critical Minerals Supply Act, which is more of a general question of prioritization and resource focus, et cetera. I'm interested, with you being in the game, and you deal with a lot of government officials, you deal with a lot of scientists, you deal with a lot of private sector leaders in this space. What are the pieces of policy that are still missing? So Congresswoman, I'd love to get your thoughts on what haven't we done yet that we need to begin thinking about in addition to these bits of legislation. And Carla, would love to get your thoughts too.
And we'll be at the Ames Lab in 2 weeks. So we're bringing members of Congress. I think we've done it like 3 years in a row, or for 3 years of my now 5th year in Congress. And so hopefully we'll meet Carl then.
Okay, great. But your thoughts on what else we need to be doing?
Oh, you want Carl or Carl to answer first?
No.
First and foremost, I think there's an education process of members in Congress. I think, as I said, Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum, I think they understand and they get it. We're hoping Secretary Wright will be with us when we come to the Ames Lab in August. So I think, in education of members, education of the importance, and then where these elements are. And then, first things first, we can get the permitting done now and then start on these other bills to get them through as rapidly as possible. Our bill on the recycling at Ames Lab from hard drives, that got put into the NDAA. So it's possible you can get bills put through in other areas. We need to have a hearing on our bills. So to get those brought up and passed through, I think is going to be important. But there is an education that's necessary, I think, of members of Congress about the importance, why it's of national interest,
Right.
and that, the areas where they're utilized is vastly beyond just the energy sector or solar panels. So I think that is one of the first things, because then you gain more support as you do that. So we're continuing in that process and as part of the Conservative Climate Caucus. So, I think there's work to be done, but I do think it's important. We know the importance of AI, and you mentioned that earlier. We've got a copper mine, Duluth, Minnesota. It's the largest copper mine. They've been trying to get, permitted to be able to operate. The unions want them to operate. We need copper for our grid and for all the other vast array of things that we need to do. So we have the ability, we have the facility. It's just getting the wherewithal and then in regards to both seabed mining and what we're doing on rare earths and processing. There is a regulatory framework that I think is very important.
Carl, let's get a quick snapshot from you, and then I'm going to thank you for joining us and bring Mike and Christy into the conversation. But Carl, what are we missing out there?
Well, I do agree with Representative Miller-Meeks, absolutely, that education, and that's really our role here at the laboratory, that we can talk with all the policymakers, but we bring them is our knowledge, right, and our maybe our wisdom about what we know and what we've learned, and bring the science really to bear. That and building the workforce. I think that creating amazing jobs for Americans is a very important part of what we need to be doing for our nation. And the National Laboratories is just one of those training grounds where we can bring people through, or we can interact with industry to bring folks in for short periods of time to learn what we do and learn how we do it. And so the availability of programs such as that, I think, are very, very important.
Can I ask you just quick, but Carl, and thanks again for joining us, but I want to ask you real quickly, and I'm just going to be blunt. I did a program years ago with governors and community colleges and universities. It was really about kind of how do you reinvent manufacturing in America. And the thing I ran into, this is years ago before we talked about reindustrialization, was the stigma that many people felt about their kids going into the manufacturing era. You really felt it palpably that people did not want their kids going into that because they felt like that industry had been abandoned and lost. I think mining is similar. Are you sensing a change in attitude and current as you trying to talk about workforce and other people going into this? As I really don't know the answer to this in terms of whether we've substantially changed that stigma that used to be attached to working in these more manufacturing-oriented sectors.
I would say that it's changing, but it's changing locally. So there are pockets of places in the United States where it is changing. And spending time in Alaska was just amazing. I see that there, that, there are people that really have to live with the land and be both stewards of the land, but are also utilizing the resources to increase the wealth of our
And in
nation.
Mike's case, live with the bears.
Yeah, I am definitely going back to Alaska on vacation next year. Just a beautiful spot. But I think that's local. And so I do believe that there's a lot of work to be done to spread this across the nation. But
Mariannette, did you want to respond on that issue as well as workforce?
I think that there is, and I'm going to say what may be an ally in the workforce. Number one is that one of the first bills I sponsored when I got into Congress was community colleges to have a counselor in high schools, and this was in the state of Iowa, in order to, direct people towards trades rather than towards college. And then the other thing is the proliferation of television reality shows about mining. And I know that sounds weird, and a lot of it is on gold, but that's helpful. If young people can see themselves, you've got this, I can't remember the young guy's name, the gold mining in Alaska. I can't remember his name. He started, Parker maybe, started out with his grandpa, and now he's taken over. But I know it sounds weird, but if people can see themselves in a profession, and they can see it as other than, coal mines or steel mills going out of business, then that helps to push people in that area. So you've got good paying jobs. You have people who have skill sets that aren't adept to go to a 4-year institution, and we should absolutely applaud them and encourage them. And so what we do on concurrent enrollment on the policy side, concurrent enrollment apprenticeships, whether they be Department of Labor apprenticeships or company apprenticeships, what young people can see on television, I think all of that is shifting this framework that you have to go to a 4-year university in order to be successful. You certainly do not, and we want to encourage that talent wherever it is.
A note to Christy and our PRISM team and our critical minerals team. I want those people from those shows and Netflix or Max or wherever they're at to come join one of these conversations. So that'll be a future edition. And I hope, Mariannette, you'll come back to that. Don't leave yet. Carl, we're going to say farewell to you for a moment, and you can just go back into the session. Let me bring Mike Satry and Christy in for conversation with the Congresswoman. So Christy and Mike, you've heard a little bit of where our discussion is. Mike is sitting in Alaska and talking about this. Do you have any questions or thoughts and reactions to Congresswoman Miller-Meeks' comments?
Well, Congresswoman, it's been fantastic to have you on and to get your perspective on this. And it's really great to see you engaged in the space and everything that the mining industry has been trying to do to push our priorities. You know, you've gone right onto those. You're supporting us, and I think you truly understand these issues. You know, from a policy perspective, you know, you're right. You know, education has been incredibly important. I think we're getting to that point where policymakers understand the importance of mining, and that's fantastic. And we're addressing permitting reform. You know, we've got a bipartisan bill in the House, the SPEED Act, that's going to address not only permitting but litigation. So that's fantastic. So now it's what's the next step? Because you know, miners are we're really good at mining, and we stand ready to meet the country's needs on that. But this processing conversation and into the manufacturing conversation is incredibly important. So what we have to start looking at now is, hey, you know, mining and then the downstream processing and manufacturing is incredibly energy and capital intensive. So when we have these energy conversations in the United States, we're talking about how we're going to fund data centers and AI and communities and all this. Don't forget mining and processing, because we don't want to be in a situation where a mine or a smelter is competing with with Microsoft's next AI center. You know, we need to have abundant, cheap, available energy, you know, for all of our industries, and that will also facilitate the downstream manufacturing as well. But we also have to figure out how we're going to pull levers on the economic side. We have to attract capital back into the United States on the processing and manufacturing piece. You know, I have family in the freight business, and they always say that you know, freight follows the easiest path possible, no matter whatever it is. And the same goes with capital. You want a return on your investment. You don't want to wait 30, 40 years. So how do we get capital back to the United States, build processing facilities, and then have that downstream manufacturing? And we have to have everybody together: miners, processors, you know, the manufacturing companies. It has to be a whole of the economy conversation, and look at what policy levers have to be pulled.
Thank you. Let me get a snapshot.
I think he answered his question. What's next? Mining is just part of it. So you're right. Capital goes where it's friendly. And so when you have no price transparency, you don't have market signals, you really don't have a market. Capital is, and then you have a regulatory apparatus and public non-support because of what they've been trained to believe about the environment, about dangers. That shifted all of this overseas. And that's why when I say it's a national interest and national security, I use those words very specifically, because mining is the first step. China controls most of it and controls the market, and there's no price transparency. So you're right, mining, and then we need processing capacity, whether that's here or friend-shored or near-shored. You can't just simply export the raw ore. HR 3617 addresses some of this, so that's within this process. And then setting the infrastructure for a marketplace where there's price signals will help with the investment. But first and foremost, we as a country have to show an interest. And then vis-a-vis energy, you took my tagline. My constant refrain on energy is we need any of the above. Yeah. Our demand for energy, we can grow our economy, increase our wealth as a nation, and also compete with China on the basis of energy. We need all energy types. We need energy now. It is not a 5-year or 10-year problem. It's why the permitting is so, the SPEED Act, the permitting, the liability is so important. It's why we came out in support of the tax energy credits, which many of us would have voted on individually had it been as individual bills or entities. So I couldn't agree with you more. Our bill focuses on kind of the missing middle in the supply chain, which is converting raw ore to usable materials for manufacturing. So manufacturing, energy, defense, electronics, aerospace, automotive, we can bring all of these industries together and make this something of national interest. And I think it's going to take all of us to do that. And to your point, absolutely need energy to be able to do this.
Christy, let me give you a quick snapshot. I know the Congresswoman has to go, so let me get a quick exchange between the two of you, and I'm going to thank the Congresswoman in advance. I'll also tell you that Rob Harleston of C-SPAN, because I always like people, you know, he's a congressional editor at C-SPAN, great guy. He says how much of rare earth mining could be enhanced or restricted by the current administration's use of tariffs. If anybody wants to comment on that, that'd be great. But Christy? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one yet. So thank you, Congressman, for all of your leadership on this issue. I look forward to future conversations. We at PRISM have worked closely with Congressman Palmer. He briefed our group a couple weeks ago, and then we briefed in detail the Energy and Commerce Committee staff, and would be happy to provide a resource and a sounding board for you for any ideas and suggestions, particularly if amendments and ideas come up. So thanks for your leadership on that. Completely agree that workforce training is kind of the hidden crisis right now. Every single solitary roundtable that we've had in the past 5 years, and we've had several of them, the CEOs of of any company, whether it's Microsoft to mining companies, to packaging companies, to General Motors, say, in addition to copper keeps them up at night, it's lack of skilled workers. And so I think there's a misnomer, about the industry. So Steve, I love your idea about getting some of those, Netflix actors to try to make it sexy again. But I think if we can rename community colleges to technical colleges or universities or something to jazz it up. I also, there are a lot of companies like Microsoft and Apple that are opening up advanced manufacturing training facilities in conjunction with universities to try to do this. I'm from Michigan, and manufacturing is very important in Michigan. We're actually working very closely with some of those companies to do that. And I think, Congresswoman, when you're looking at some of this legislation, we're looking at creating some, I don't want to call hubs, but regional hubs, maybe 10 around the country, where we actually have entire closed loop supply chains that includes the energy security, that includes critical minerals, rare earths, then manufacturing, as well as technical training. So
and it's interesting, one of our community project funding was for a center in Scott County. It's our largest county in our district, Davenport, Quad Cities.
Oh, excellent.
Focused on industrial tech training. So the whole thing is focused on there. It's the Blong Technical Center. And so it's it was several $1 million, but it's trying to get a pipeline, a workforce pipeline into things that are non-four-year college degrees. And that's how, so I love this idea, and I'm going to have to leave, but thank you for that. So let's continue to work on it.
Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks, really, really appreciate you spending some time with us, and thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you. I know one of the things we're going to try and do is interact. I think there's a very inactive Congressional Critical Minerals Caucus that we need to kind of jazz up, and maybe we'll work with you to kind of do that. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to do now, if Chrissy and Mike are up for it, is, we've got some really cool people online. We've got Nobuo Tanaka, who's the former, Nobuo, are you there? You want to turn your mic on? He's the former head of the International Energy Association in Geneva. We've got some really, really great people. Nobuo, you're sitting in Tokyo, and I have no idea what time it is there. You almost beat Mike, who's in Juneau. We have got this
almost midnight.
Yeah. We can do online and global, but real short form. Do you have a question or comment that would help us understand some of the energy and critical materials perspective? Right. You're sitting in Japan right next to China. Be interested in a quick snapshot of your map.
Sure. Thank you very much, Steve, to inviting me. I was the head of the International Energy Agency, IEA, based in Paris, not in Vienna or Geneva. Yeah. But the issue was
all Europe.
Well, that's true. Paris is beautiful, by the way. The current issue of this critical minerals monopoly situation by China, certainly IEA was very aware of the risk, and now doing lots of the studies about how can alliance or the countries with the U.S. alliance can do together. In fact, the IEA was created when the consumer countries were attacked by the OPEC countries in the Middle East by embargo of the oil exportation to the US and other countries. So IEA was created to make the strategic stockpile of oil in case of emergency. So the similar situation with China's critical mineral areas, already there was a early wake-up call when China hit Japan in 2010 about the territorial dispute issue raised on the Senkaku Island, and China stopped exporting rare earths for the auto sector in Japan. Maybe we didn't take it that serious. I mean, because that was a very interesting test for the Chinese strategy, because they are aware the importance of rare earths for the auto sectors, batteries, aerospace, and because of the electrification and advanced energy system is coming, so Chinese investment into these elements of the new technologies, they come to aware. Because it's not a big volume or a big money investment needed for the rare earths or critical mineral, but so it is easy for China to control this material vis-a-vis US, vis-a-vis Japan, or vis-a-vis Europe, and now they use it very significantly. So I think, Christy, you mentioned about the alliance or use of alliance for making the case for the security of these materials. I think IEA is the best place to do first. The Fatih Birol was criticized these days by your Congress because he went too far to the green side. But IEA should be utilized because of they have the good knowledge about the alliance for the security of energy and critical. They are quite aware the critical mineral is a very important of the future energy system in the battery, because that provide a flexibility of the energy system. So this is a very critical material for the energy security. Use IEA. That is my message to Steve. And
Noble, thank you. Thank you so much. Christy, quick comment. I want to come back to Mike. We've only got a few minutes left, so we need to be very brief in our comments. So Mike, Christy?
No, I mean, I just think, you can't have energy without critical minerals, rare earths, and you can't have critical minerals, rare earths without energy. So total nexus there. I think it's a great idea to look at IEA for some additional thoughts and leadership. But it's, both energy and critical minerals, rare earths underpin modern society. And we absolutely, we need to understand that. We need to get that message out, and we need to work on a whole of nation strategy with our allies to make it a level playing field.
Great. Mike, quick thought. And I want to bring in, I think we had Alex Tripp, but I think he took off. So it's good to have him here. Let me bring in Sophia Economopoulos. Mike, quick thought?
Yeah, just a quick thought on that is that, we're decades behind on having a national mineral strategy. And until we, really, utilize every resource we have, whether it's in Congress, whether it's working with the associations, the mining companies, until we bring everybody together, figure out what that's going to be. Once, like I said earlier, we're not even at the starting line of the race.
Sophia, do you have a comment or question?
I do. Sorry, I can't be on video. I just was curious about how the mining industry is looking at kind of maybe partnering with innovative startups in the US, looking at maybe ways of sustainably mining or mining differently for lithium. For example, I have a friend who's working at a firm called Electroflow Technologies. They're looking at lithium and brining. So I'm just curious if that's something the mining industry overall is thinking about, especially as we're trying to get ahead in this
Mike,
war.
One of the questions that does come up is the ecosystem of business and innovation around the mining sector. And Hecla is so big. I'm just wondering, to what degree is that play in the kind of ecosystem for you?
Yeah, and I think we and other companies pride ourselves as being as innovative as possible. Mining has changed in the almost 30 years that I've been in the business, immensely. We're always looking at ways to do things better, and I think now the shift has started to be towards how do we recover more of our metals, or in a better way, not just the target metals that we have at our operations, but any of these associated critical minerals that might be in an existing waste stream that we never thought about before, but now these things are using new technologies and there's a market for it, and we need to maximize that value, coming out of the rock, because ultimately in the long term, mining isn't sustainable. There's a finite amount, of ore in the deposit that we found that we're going to mine. So we have to maximize every ounce, every pound, every gram of metal that's coming out of it, and make sure that we're, constantly working with our universities, our research labs to find innovative ways to, get beyond just, the kind of the standard metal flotation, concentrate producing business that many of us are in. So we're always looking for that, and I think mining industry has not always been good about reaching out to some of our downstream partners to figure out more of what they need and how we can collaborate. But we're starting to enter that space, and we look forward to working more on that.
Let me bring in real quickly in our last minute, Lisi Docanto, who's posted something here. Lisi?
Thank you. I've asked a question about copper. I work with one of the largest design build construction companies in the United States, and focusing on critical metals, and in particular on the copper. And I think we know, as we heard, that copper is in a growing crisis with demand soaring and our production being as low as it is. And so the question is what the present administration doing with trying to add critical copper to the critical minerals list, and the tariffs going to be enough to help boost U.S. production, considering all the other challenges that exist with mining production in the U.S., notwithstanding what we saw recently with Ivanhoe launching the mine there in Arizona.
Great, and I think that gets close to what Rob Harlison asked as well. Let me ask Mike and Christy both to respond and offer their final comments so we end on time. So Mike, quick thought or reaction?
Yep. Yeah, so adding copper to the critical minerals list needed to be done. Absolutely need to be done. All of industry was advocating for that, and that will help us, especially on the permitting side. So that's step one. The tariff conversation is very different. I think the idea there is we want to use those tariffs to foster, more processing of copper in the United States. And I guess, personally, I'm not sure how fast we can respond to that. So it remains to be seen if that's going to be an effective lever. But if that's the lever the White House is going to use, then we all better be able to respond to it and see what we can do to bring, processing into place, because we can open up our copper mines in Montana tomorrow, but where do we send our concentrates, right? So that's the big question.
Christy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yes, ditto. Copper needs to be added to the critical minerals list. PRISM has been pushing for that for quite some time and educating on that. We stand waiting to see what the administration is going to do on 232 copper, which they're saying is coming out today, tomorrow. So stand by for that. Several of our members are actively engaged on that. The one thing I will say is that what we need to figure out, and this is a whole of nation, is the litigation. This administration fast-tracked resolution, copper mine, which is, I think, 30 years trying to get operational. And another lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court yesterday, halting operations. So we need to figure out the litigious nature from the local and the state level, and figure out where it's coming from, and involve communities in the discussion of mining to make certain it's not considered as bad as they think it is.
Thank you.
Well, listen, just as we wrap this, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being with us. We've started these. I want to thank, PRISM and the team at PRISM, the team at Widehall that works with all of this as well. Also, our friends at Dresslovka, who aren't here today, but Dresslovka has been very involved with helping us set up this quarterly conversation, which PRISM has been partner of. We have lots of players in this ecosystem online that have been trying to elevate and to create a greater density and a sense of urgency around this conversation. I want to thank Mike Satre from Hecla Industries, who's joined us, Hecla Mining, who's joining us from Alaska, Christy Rogers, the president and CEO of PRISM. I want to thank Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks for joining us, and all of you. And really, we'll keep doing this. And so keep part of the ecosystem. If you have great ideas, please send them our way. I'm Steve Clemens. Thank you all so much.
Thanks all.
Thanks all.